first of a two-part session that we're hosting, one today and the next one on Tuesday. Just to let you know, if you have any questions as we go through, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to use that. We do have people in the background who can answer questions as we go, and we'll also go through them at the end of the session. This session is also being recorded. So a little run through of the agenda that we've got today. We're going to be going through staying ahead of attacker methodologies, the new types of attacker activities, ensuring your cyber essentials, understanding and best practice in the workforce, how to build cyber threat mitigation skills, any ongoing threats. So cyber criminals are shifting their tactics all the time. So we're going to be going through those, and of course, compliance and the regulations that you need. A little introduction, because we've got quite a few of us on this webinar today and some new faces. I'm Zoe Duffy, I'm the sales manager at Claritas. So I lead the sales team here. I've been here for around 5 years and have worked in the tech industry for about 9. And my role is to speak to customers about their security goals and anything that they need to give them that competitive advantage, reduce their costs, and of course to mitigate risk. I'm also joined by James Rentoul at Node 4. James has over 15 years experience working in this industry, and he'll be talking a little more about what he does in a few minutes. So who are Claritas? Claritas have been around since 1996, and we're a privately owned IT solutions company. We specialise in security solutions for businesses of all shapes and sizes across the UK. And in particular for this session, we can help with any IT health checks, penetration testing, and anything to do with your security infrastructure. Some of the customers that we work with, as you can see, we do work with customers across all industry types, which is really helpful because we've got a wealth of industry knowledge across all of those. So, you know, we're not tied to any particular vertical. And now I'm going to hand over to James at Node 4, who will be able to talk a little bit more about what they do. Thank you.
Zoe, the screen's disappeared for the presentation.
Okay, that's not helpful. Hang on one second. Little bit of technical difficulties here. Give us just 1 second.
Yeah, it's back.
Can everybody see the screen now?
Yeah.
Wonderful. James, sorry, over to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Zoe. It's very kind. So yeah, Node 4. So yeah, Node 4, we've been about for a wee while. We started off as a wee data center company, and we've now moved into other verticals, including Microsoft and managed services, and security as well. So because of that, we've got a massive range of skills, going from the base infrastructure of the data centers all the way up to the platform, and managing the whole end-to-end delivery of IT to small, medium businesses and some larger businesses as well. We have a huge range of customers, ranging from hobbycraft to sell wool online, all the way to healthcare, and indeed some weapons manufacturers as well. So we really do cover a broad spectrum, and that allows us to see a massive threat landscape. So yes, some of the facts and figures here about the cost of cybercrime and fraud. So last year, or sorry, 2 years ago now, in 2021, global cybercrime topped $6 trillion per annum, and it's estimated that'll go up to 10 trillion by 2025. So it really is a huge business. And just in the UK, it's seen to generate around £27 billion per annum. So it really is something we need to put some focus on. So, and I think the next stat really shows that. So this year, if cybercrime was a country, then it's going to be the third largest economy in the world after the US and China. And then 60% of the small and medium businesses in the UK experienced a cyber attack in 2021. So that doesn't mean to say that 60% of businesses were ransomware. Just means that they've had some sort of effect of cybercrime, whether that be user details phished and put on the dark web, or they were DDoSed, or they saw some sort of attack that maybe wasn't quite as bad as a ransomware, but they've definitely been attacked. Having said that, though, ransomware is the #1 cyber threat for enterprises and so on that we face at the moment. So that's what we need to be very careful of. So next slide, please. So yeah, the internet, it's a crazy place. Definitely has some design flaws, as you can see here. The left arm doesn't always speak to the right arm. We can see people designing one thing and not thinking about the other, and it leads to things like these images here, but on the internet, obviously. So yeah, next slide, please. So just seeing a wee note there saying some people are unable to see the slides. I don't know if I can. Can everyone else see them? Just make sure before we go on. Gavin, can you see the slides there? Is that yeah? Okay, cool.
Yeah, fine on my screen.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll just continue then if that's all right.
Okay.
So vulnerabilities. So vulnerabilities are one of the main things that we really need to look out for in the security world. Vulnerabilities are how people get in. They're how people steal data. They're how people have the access to do the bad things within our environments. How do those vulnerabilities manifest? Well, they can manifest in many ways. One of the main ones that we look for is privileged escalation. So this doesn't always need to be an outside attacker. This can also be an inside attacker. It can be a threat from within inside your business. So what does it mean? It means I'm a user, say on the shop floor, or just a general user. I don't really have many privileges. I've managed to take my privileges up to, say, an administrator, to a power user. I've been able to install some apps. I've been able to scan the network. I've been able to do things within the environment that allow me to then cause a security incident. So we need to be careful of that. Equally as important is configuration vulnerabilities. So these aren't necessarily code vulnerabilities. These aren't necessarily things that we need to patch. They are things that we've left open, such as an open port in a firewall. We opened a port to do some checking, and we've forgotten to turn it off. We've got to disable that port, and it's led to that firewall then being open, and we've forgotten about it. Weak or default passwords, another crucial vulnerability. Again, it can't really be patched, but it's down to your password policy, allowing to make sure that you're not allowing weak passwords or default passwords. One of the ones that I think about is, in years gone by, our ISPs would ship routers to our homes, and they would have admin set up as the management username and password for your home router. Everyone knows that the IP address of your home router is 192.168.0.1, and if you can connect into the Wi-Fi and then use that, you can then have full control of the home network. Now, okay, that's a home situation, but it is equally the same for our businesses. Is our firewall managed by a third party? Have they changed the password, or is it still on admin, as an example? Missing security patches. So we all know that patching is a bit of a nightmare. How do you keep up to date with it? But it's one of the main things that we need to do. The people attacking you know of these vulnerabilities. They want to be using them. And in fact, they're paid to find them. Bug bounties are out there by all manufacturers and all software vendors, and they are looking for our red teams or indeed hackers to find these, speak to them before they put them on the web, and maybe get a wee bounty for that. And when they find one of these things, these are what we call 0-day vulnerabilities. So they're not known about by the vendors, and they are not known about by us, the victims. So it's hard to protect against those. But you can. There are things that we can do to protect about those, and I will come on to those later on. So next slide, please. So what about the threat landscape just now? How are we looking? Well, I'm sure we've heard in the news of the hacks that are going on at the moment, which I will come on to say that we are at a time when cyber criminals are doing a lot. So Russia and Ukraine, obviously the Russian-Ukraine conflict has caused a bit of change here, but it was in the past that Russia, as a state actor, was working quite heavily with Ukrainian coders, criminals, and they were doing a lot of phishing and a lot of ransomware, and they were really going for it. We actually saw a dip in the amount of people ransomwaring when the conflict started. The Ukrainians and the Russians obviously fell out. However, these two actors are now starting to work independently of each other more, and we're starting to see that go up a bit. So some of you may have heard of Lockbit. So Lockbit are really interesting. They do ransomware as a service. A crazy idea, but it has worked incredibly well for them. So they're a bunch of coders. They've coded some ransomware, and they sell it to anyone that wants it. And they will work with they've got affiliates around the world, and these affiliates can come back to Lockbit and say, I have access to this company has a massive revenue, and we're likely to get this much money from it. Can you help me? I've got in, can you help me ransomware them? And they will. And they'll give the attacker support. And they have a full selling model and a full business behind it. And that then allows them to ransomware us and put our details. So if you get onto the dark web, they have a website on the dark web that has a list of everyone that their affiliates have hacked. It has how long they have to pay the ransomware, and if they don't pay the ransomware, they can then download the data from it. And it's proven to be a very successful model for them. So Lapsus, I'm sure some of you have heard of Lapsus. They've definitely been in the news recently. They are an international group of cyber criminals. They've had many attacks in 2022. Some of them listed there: Okta, Ubisoft, Samsung, the Uber one that's become quite famous, Rockstar Games, and Nvidia. Nvidia make graphics cards. That was because Nvidia made some changes to their graphics cards that made it hard to mine cryptocurrencies. So they went after them and did a pretty good job of it as well. They are they're wide-ranging. Lapsus, they have many affiliates as well, and it's not hardened IT people that we may expect. It can be 18-year-olds in their bedrooms that join with them. And the reason that they're so big at the moment is because it looks as if they've done the Royal Mail. We all know about the Royal Mail happening recently. It looks like GCHQ have come in to help them out. They are still recovering from that. Things are getting back to normal. They are sending some more parcels, but certainly internationally, they are really struggling to send their parcels, and it's because Lapsus have got in and ransomware. So next slide, please. So a wee case study here. So First American Corporation, they're financial services in California, and they've experienced one of the biggest hacks ever. 885 million records were stolen. The records included social security numbers, bank account details, mortgage agreements, a phenomenal amount of information. How did it happen? So it happened because there was a website out there that was commonly used, but an attacker managed to find that a link in there to a file share that had no authentication. So this comes back to our configuration vulnerability, really. They were able to index that file share, see what was available. Obviously, it took them a wee bit of time with 885 million records in there. And once they'd indexed it, realized that the information was good, they started a process of exfiltrating that data. They did it slowly. They took their time over it. It didn't alert anyone to it. Didn't matter what flags they had for data loss prevention or any of that sort of thing, because they were doing it so slow that it didn't flag anything. And eventually they released all this information out to the web, and a First American had to come forth to say that all this data had been stolen. So it really does show you that configuration vulnerabilities are as big as any other vulnerabilities out there, because this really doesn't take much to find. It just needs someone trawling the website and eventually they find it. They didn't even need any coding skills or any hacking skills. All they needed to do was highlight the data and download it to their machine. Next slide, please. Go. So moving on to a little bit of some policies that we can put in place. The Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, I'm sure we've all heard of it. It's created by the government and is a framework to guide your policy. It is almost a minimum standard. They don't actually go into what software you need to be using. It's quite generic in how they put forth the things that they think you should be doing, and it gives you options about how you want to accomplish that fit your business. But they are things that you need to be doing to give yourself a good idea of how well you're prepared for an attack. So that's why you should bother. It prepares you for an attack. It allows you to have a minimum standard. It's inexpensive and to gain the actual certificate, but it doesn't prevent you from being hacked. What it does do is allow you to recover from a hack. It puts everything in place for you to be best positioned to make sure that you're more than likely not going to be, and if you are, that you're ready to recover from that situation as best as possible. 2 ways to obtain it. You can do a self-audited Cyber Essentials, so you can get a list of questions out there and you can respond to them, and then those answers are audited by Cyber Essentials, but it's the answers that are audited. So it's how true you are being to yourself. And then Cyber Essentials Plus actually has an auditor come on site. They'll take a subset of your infrastructure and your policies and make sure that they align with the correct answers. And we'll give you a Cyber Essentials Plus at the end of it. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how do we prepare for this? So Cyber Essentials is one way of preparing for it. There are other ways of preparing for it, because you need to prepare, defend, and respond. So one of the best ways to prepare is on the next slide, please. Thank you. So ethical hacking, red teaming, as it's commonly known as well. So ethical hacking is where we get a group of people that we trust, and we ask them to try and hack into our systems. This can take many guises. You can take this all the way down to a person wearing a hard hat and a high vis and saying, "Oh, I've forgotten my pass. Can I get into your building?" So it depends on what level you want to take this to. And this, we're going to talk about your IT infrastructure as opposed to social engineering. So penetration testing is when we get your external IP addresses, all of them, and we try and get in through what you're publishing to the internet. So the first thing we'll do, as we've talked about, is scan for a list of known vulnerabilities that are on your systems. And then we may even be able to chain those vulnerabilities together to give us more access or privilege escalation that we've talked about before. Each of these vulnerabilities is rated as a CVE score, so a common vulnerability and exposure score. It's rated from 0 to 10, from no exposure to critical. And we're obviously looking for 10s or 9s, 9.8s, etc. And we want to try and utilize those to get in. Once we've done all this and we see how far we can get in, we can put a report together. That report can be used to gain Cyber Essentials, PCI, ISO. In fact, they're a requirement of those, that if you're going for any of those audits, then you're required to run a penetration test against your infrastructure. You can schedule it to run monthly, but most people do it yearly. And there are two types of scan, manual and automatic. Automatic is getting into our AI, and it allows you to run it and just have some tick boxes done. Manual is going a little bit further. It's using a bit more what I like to call human intelligence. It's getting an actual a red teamer to come in and really hit your infrastructure hard and go through everything that is out there and see if they can get in. So next slide, please. So the other side of red teaming is web application testing. So web applications are things that you have published to the internet. So if you have a website, if you have a web shop, if you're publishing an API so that people can integrate with your systems, these all need to be tested. So we generally test against the Open Web Application Security Project's top 10. So they have a top 10 of common vulnerabilities within code, and we test against those. So SQL injection, privilege escalation, backdoors that are within the code that has been written that allows us to get in and get to the back end of the website, whatever that may be, whether it's a SQL database, etc. And you may have a flat website, which is just sort of showing what you do and having your address out there and on that sort of thing. These are the things that we need to be careful of, particularly if we've got forms or if we're publishing an email address on there, because all of these things lead up to other security things that we need to be careful of. OSINT is something that we haven't really touched on, but it's open source intelligence. So what can I get from anything that's out there free of use, whether it be your website, whether it be your employees' Facebook. One of the things that we're seeing attacks on is if you're on your website, there is a link to someone, a chief or a director or so on, that can be used to then go into phishing, which we're going to cover on Tuesday. Other elements that can be done here is the APIs that I mentioned earlier. So these obviously use RESTful or SOAP or other codes that back off and allow access to your data. So if they're not secured properly, if they don't have the right authentication on them, attackers can use that to exfiltrate more data. So next slide, please. So yeah, just as a final slide here, thought we would do what Node 4 and Claritas Solutions have in our arsenal to help you here. It's not just penetration testing that we've covered here, which obviously includes the web application testing that we've gone through. We've got the managed vulnerability scanning as well that can be used internally as opposed to the external penetration testing that we've talked about. We've got managed firewall, which obviously helps when you're doing your penetration testing. We have threat detect. Threat detect is a Siemens SOC solution. And this really is when you're starting to get into the really good parts of security. It's for those of you that know, it's NDR, it's XDR or EDR. It's all of those things rolled up into a team that are just purely looking at security events. With infrastructure security, end user security, so AVs available through the myriad of AVs that are available. We've got some good ones within there. Phishing assessments and security e-learning, which are much of the same thing, which we'll come on to on Tuesday, so I won't touch on those too much. And then we also have a security advisory team. So this is a little bit like your vCISO. So if you do want to take things forward, if you do want to improve your security, we have an advisory team that can come in and help you take the right action at the right time. See what your security footing is like and help you get to a place where you are ready to defend yourself against any attack and indeed recover from any attack should the worst thing happen. And if the worst thing does happen, we also have incident response, so we can help you recover from that. Yeah, that's where we are just now on the security side of things. So I don't know if there's any questions that.
That's great. Thank you, James. That's really, really interesting. Quite a lot to go through as well in such a short session. So I really appreciate that. We do have a few questions. If you don't mind answering a couple, that would be fantastic. Just to start with, how often would you need to scan your network?
Oh yeah, so there are definitely varying degrees of needing to scan your network, and it's very much up to your security posture as to how often you scan.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of scanning quarterly, just to make sure that everything is there. But when we start getting into the web application testing and things that you publish to the internet, I would take that more regular, almost like any time that you do a change, you really want to have that change tested to make sure that you haven't introduced any other backdoors or any other code execution that could be used against other parts of your website that you haven't thought about. Again, it comes back to that element of making sure that your left hand is speaking to the right hand, and that just because you put a form into one page that you're not exposing another vulnerability somewhere else.
No, absolutely. I mean, what would you do first? So you were talking about cyber essentials, and then you're talking about penetration testing. If it was you and your business, do you have any kind of recommendations on which one you should start with? Do cyber essentials kind of lead to the penetration testing, or is it the other way around?
So it's a really, really good question, actually. So cyber essentials can take a wee bit of time to get to.
Yeah.
And if you've never penetration tested, I would penetration test first. That way you can at least see your risk at that moment in time. There will come a point when cyber essentials needs you to test anyway. But if you've got that on file, it's not a bad thing to do. That penetration test may also lead you to your priorities in what you want to solve first within when you're going for cyber essentials or cyber essentials plus. So you can actually use that as almost like an instigator to your project plan. Okay.
And with cyber essentials, how does that differ from ISO 27001, for example?
Yeah, another good question. So they do go quite hand in hand, and some would see ISO 27001 as a better qualification to get, but I see them as quite separate. So ISO 27001 really goes into a full policy framework for your business while it's using IT. So it covers things like what you do in the event of your office being closed and there being bad weather out there. I mean, hopefully the snow returns soon so I can go skiing. But what happens when you do that? How do you make sure that your infrastructure, your business is protected when everyone's working from home? And it has policies for that, and it has other policies that are related to your office and so on. Whereas Cyber Essentials is really a framework to help you get to a place where you're ready to have a cyber attack, you're ready to recover from a cyber attack. You have all of your infrastructure that is out there, including endpoints, and you know where they are and who they belong to. And it really does lead you to a little bit more precise recovery from a cyber attack, whereas ISO is a bit more policy based. If that makes sense.
No, that does make perfect sense. And earlier you talked about, was it CVS scores?
Yeah.
Could you go into a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah, certainly. So actually, there was a one that came out over the weekend there, which was quite an interesting one. So there was a vulnerability for VMware that came out over the weekend. I say came out; it was actually recommunicated by the industry, and it allowed privilege escalation within VMware, and it actually came out in 2021, and it was rated as 8.8. But recently it's been upgraded to a 9.8. What does all of that mean? So it really means, so when you do a CVE score, it takes things like attack vector, it takes attack complexity, it takes the privileges that you require to do the vulnerability. Does it require any user interaction? What is the scope of it? How will it affect your availability, your confidentiality, or your integrity? And it will take each of those aspects that I've just talked about, and it will rate them. So if it's really, really easy to do, it's going to get a higher score. If it's going to affect your availability, it's going to take a higher score. If it's going to take any of your confidentiality, any user details and so on, then it's going to get a higher score. So you can look at the score of the CVE and find out how bad that vulnerability is. So therefore, if we do a penetration test or a vulnerability scan, and we see we have 50 vulnerabilities out there, but 40 of them are rated at 4.4. Well, cool, not ideal, but we can live with that. We can mitigate those in some way, but we've got another 10 that are rated 9 above. Well, we need to be on those. We need to almost drop everything and get all over those. Yeah. They're rated as critical. Anything above 9 is critical. Anything from 9 to 7, I believe, is high, and so on and so forth downwards.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you for those. I don't have any other questions that have come through just yet, but if anybody does have any more questions, please get in touch with me, and yeah, I'm more than happy to get those all answered. With that in mind as well, I mean, clearly cybersecurity is massive, and it's ever growing, and you know, big industry, as you talked about earlier, James. So in terms of our next steps, what we're offering people on this call, the opportunity to talk to James and you know, our technical experts about what you're currently doing, just to kind of guide you in the next steps, because you know, Cyber Essentials, pen testing, there are so many different things to think about. Do take the opportunity to talk to us about your next steps, and you know, we'll be in touch, and you can yeah, see what fits best for your business, because it's all very well on these calls going through these things, but obviously the security infrastructure that you have is very bespoke to your business. So we'd love the opportunity to talk to you a little bit more about what you currently do and how we could potentially help. We do have some more webinars coming up as well. So on Tuesday is the second part to this webinar, which James will be hosting again with us. So please, if you're not already registered for that, do get registered. And we're still focusing on that cyber landscape, and we've got 2 more webinars happening in March with another partner of ours, Checkpoint. So it would be great if anybody would like to register for those 2. We'll be in touch and make sure that everybody's got the links for those. If you've got any questions, my contact details are there. Please do get in touch with me. Be more than happy to help. And just a thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you very much, James, for all of your expertise. It is very much appreciated. And I look forward to speaking with everyone soon.